It wasn't a dramatic collapse. There were no screams, no final words, no tragedy with a name, just a moment, a quiet one, a night where something inside you let go, and you never quite noticed. You went to bed as yourself, but woke up as someone else, someone quieter, someone lighter, not in spirit, but in presence. Lighter because a part of you didn't come back. That night wasn't the end of your life. It was the end of your freedom to fully feel it. Maybe no one else remembers it. Maybe it looked normal, but inside, something made a decision. I can't carry this as I am, so I'll become someone who can. You didn't die. You adapted. You created a version of yourself that could endure, that could still smile, perform, obey. A survivor self. One that learned how to breathe without needing air. One that made pain so silent, even you forgot how to hear it. But silence isn't healing. It's just rehearsal for forgetting, and the forgetting becomes routine. Habits, careers, relationships. You live forward, but you're still reacting from back there, still managing emotions you never named, still avoiding a place that doesn't exist on the map, but is stitched into your nervous system. You keep going. Days pass, achievements accumulate, people even admire you, but beneath all that, something is frozen, as if time for you still obeys a night no one else remembers. You sleep, but not as someone whole. You wake, but not as someone free. You function, but only in the role you built to never break again. And that role, it's smart, it's capable, it's safe, but it's not you, not entirely. You're not lazy, you're not lost, you're not broken. You're just loyal to a version of yourself that was created in the dark, a version that kept you alive, but also kept you small. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." But how do you make conscious what you never dared to feel? How do you unwrite a pact that was signed in silence? Schopenhauer whispered another truth. A man can do what he wills, but he cannot will what he wills. And maybe that's it. Maybe your whole life right now, though the way you work, love, delay, escape, isn't about choice. It's about choreography. Emotional muscle memory from a night you never healed. You think you're making decisions, but what if you're just trying not to return there? What if your entire routine, every delay, every overcommitment, every silence is a strategy to avoid that night? What if healing doesn't start with action, but with remembering? Because that night, the one you survived, still lives inside you, and it's still writing your script. But here, right now, we begin to read it out loud, not to erase it, but to finally wake up as someone whole. Some wounds don't leave scars, they leave patterns. You didn't collapse. You adapted, not by choice, but by necessity. And in that adaptation, a quiet trauma found its way into your nervous system, not with violence, but with silence. It wasn't a scream that stayed with you. It was the absence of one. It's the kind of trauma that doesn't interrupt your life. It becomes it. It shapes how you enter a room, how you choose your words, how quickly you say, "I'm fine." It doesn't need to shout, because it already taught your body how to avoid. You became skilled at detachment, at smiling without warmth, at changing the subject right before something real could surface. And most people never noticed. Because you're not visibly broken, you're just subtly gone. This is what the mind does when it pretends to forget. It doesn't erase, it reroutes, it builds shortcuts around the pain, and those shortcuts become personality traits. You avoid confrontation, not because you're peaceful, but because somewhere deep inside, conflict meant danger. You stay busy, not because you're ambitious, but because stillness brings you too close to the edge of something unnamed. You distance yourself emotionally, not because you don't care, but because caring used to cost too much. And over time, these emotional reflexes start writing your whole identity. You think it's you, but it's not. It's the choreography of avoidance, performed so often that you forgot there was ever a reason. This is how trauma hides in plain sight. It doesn't demand to be remembered. It just demands that you never get too close to what does. Psychologists call it experiential avoidance. You didn't choose it, your brain did, to protect you, to keep you safe. But now, years later, it's no longer protection. It's paralysis dressed as personality. You walk through life not making choices, but avoiding triggers, not moving toward what you want, but away from what you fear might repeat itself. And slowly, gently, the version of you that once wanted more, connection, depth, freedom, fades behind the one who just wanted to stay intact. It's not your fault, but it is your script. And the truth is, until you name the night that started all of this, it will keep deciding how your mornings feel, how your relationships unfold, how your silence deepens. You are not choosing, you are dodging. And somewhere beneath that strategy is the person you were before survival took the stage. You didn't evolve, you armored. What looked like growth was often just a smarter mask. What seemed like resilience was, in truth, a deeper dissociation. After that night, the one you rarely mention, maybe not even to yourself, you didn't rise. You retreated into a shape that could function, into a self that could hide its fractures behind performance. You became the reliable one, the capable one, the one who doesn't ask for much, doesn't fall apart in public, doesn't take up emotional space. But deep inside, you know, this identity wasn't born from freedom. It was constructed out of fear, fear of being hurt again, of not being chosen, of needing something real and not getting it. So you simplified yourself, not out of clarity, but out of exhaustion. You made yourself easier to love by erasing the parts that were hard to understand. You called it maturity, but it was mourning, the silent funeral of your spontaneous, messy, emotional self. Carl Jung spoke of the persona, the adaptive mask we wear to survive society. But what happens when the mask doesn't come off, when it becomes flesh? When even your solitude is performed? You were never trying to deceive anyone. You were just trying to stay safe, and that safety became a habit, a way of being, until one day you woke up and couldn't remember the last time you said what you actually felt. You stopped asking for what you needed. You stopped needing out loud. And a strange kind of pride formed around that silence, the pride of not being a burden, of enduring everything alone, of becoming invisible and calling it strength. But a life lived only to prevent pain isn't a life, it's a sentence. And no matter how much you accomplish, how well you play the role, something always feels missing, because something is. You are not who you built. You are what you had to abandon to build it. And the question that returns again and again in moments of quiet is not, what do I want? It's where did I go? That night didn't make you less, but it convinced you that less was safer. And now, every step toward truth feels like a risk. Not because you're weak, but because you remember what breaking felt like. But the mask can't breathe forever. And the soul, it keeps knocking, even through the silence. It's not laziness. It's not lack of ambition. It's fear. Not the loud kind, not the type that makes you panic. It's quieter than that, deeper. It lives behind your most reasonable excuses. It wears the voice of logic. It sounds like, I'm just not ready yet. Or, I'll start tomorrow, when I feel more aligned. But the truth is sharper, more hidden, more ancient. You're not avoiding the task. You're avoiding the pain of trying and still not being enough. Because deep down, something in you already decided, if I give it everything, and it still doesn't heal me, still doesn't free me, then what's left? So you stay in the limbo of preparation. You polish plans, you watch others move. You think, you dream, you analyze, but you don't begin. Because beginning would mean confronting the part of you that still believes it's broken beyond repair. This is why procrastination isn't an issue of time. It's a wound. It's a strategy, not of laziness, but of self-preservation. Because if you never try, then failure remains a theory, not a fact. If you stay in the realm of potential, you never have to grieve the loss of hope. You delay, not because you don't care, but because caring has always cost you too much. So now, you preserve your energy like a soldier who survived a war no one else saw. But this strategy has a side effect. It keeps you distant from the life that could be yours, from the version of you that wants to rise, not to impress, but to finally feel real. You push the future away, gently, repeatedly, because you're not sure if it holds freedom or more of the same prison. You're not lazy, you're afraid. Afraid that even your best effort might not change the feeling that follows you everywhere, that even in a new job, a new relationship, a new self, the echo will remain. But listen carefully, the echo only haunts the unfinished, and maybe the only way out isn't through perfection, but through the willingness to try, knowing it might hurt, knowing it might not fix everything, but doing it anyway, not to win, but to reclaim the part of you that still believes beginnings are sacred. You think you're in control, that the choices you make are yours, that every yes and every no comes from the present moment. But some of your decisions were made years ago, in the dark, without words, without logic. They weren't choices, they were reflexes, emotional survival codes installed quietly after that night, and they're still running. A look, a tone, a sudden silence, something seemingly small happens, and you feel yourself vanish or harden or flee. Not because you want to, but because the script takes over. That night and what followed it became a kind of psychic software, a hidden code that now decides what feels safe, what feels dangerous, what feels impossible. It decides who you trust, how close you let people get, how much joy you allow before expecting it to disappear. You say you're stuck, but you're not. You're just following orders from a time when pain rewired your instincts. Freud called it repetition compulsion, the unconscious urge to recreate old pain, to stay inside what's familiar, even if it hurts, because familiar pain feels safer than unknown freedom. And the brain, shaped by negative neuroplasticity, starts to expect suffering. It organizes your thoughts around it. It builds futures that echo the past. It convinces you that peace is suspicious, that something must be wrong if nothing is. So you self-sabotage. You retreat just when things start to open. You tighten your chest the moment vulnerability enters the room, because somewhere inside you, the past is still happening. That night isn't over. It's just being reenacted, in subtle ways, in your hesitation, in your patterns, in the strange feeling that no matter what you do, you're never quite new. You live in the present, but your nervous system obeys the past, and nothing changes until you see it. Not fix it, not fight it, just see it, with clarity, with honesty, without shame. Because once you realize the story you're inside isn't yours, something else becomes possible. A blank page, not empty, but ready. You move, constantly, you stay busy, you fill your schedule, you answer messages, you clean, you plan, you commit. And from the outside it looks like ambition, discipline, functionality, but inside, something is missing. Not because you're doing too little, but because all this doing is trying to cover something that was never addressed. A silence that frightens you, a stillness that reminds you of what you've buried. So you keep moving, not towards something, but away. Away from the version of yourself that stopped living that night, away from the part that still doesn't believe anything can be different. You confuse movement with healing, achievement with recovery, productivity with worth. But the more you do, the more hollow it feels. Because what you're chasing isn't success. It's a reconnection, a reunion with the self that got left behind, the one who was too fragile to finish becoming. You run from the feeling of nothingness, but it follows, in the quiet between tasks, in the pause after finishing something important, in the moments when no one needs you. That's when it visits, the echo, The realization that all this energy is just a mask, that you're trying to earn something you already deserved before you ever did anything. You perform healing, you perform strength. But beneath the performance, you're tired. Not tired of work, tired of not arriving, tired of pretending you're already there. Montaigne once said, "The soul which has no fixed purpose in life is lost. To be everywhere is to be nowhere." And maybe that's what hurts the most, that even after doing so much, you still feel absent from yourself. Not because you failed, but because busyness became your way of disappearing with dignity. And somewhere beneath the to-do lists, there's a voice asking to be remembered, not for what you've done, but for who you were before you started running. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. You want to believe again, in yourself, in the future, in something real. But that belief comes with a risk, the risk of being wrong again. So you hesitate, you delay, you do just enough to feel like you're trying, but never enough to find out what would really happen if you gave everything. Because hope hurts more than numbness. To hope is to open yourself to possibility and therefore to disappointment. It's to admit you still care, even after all that's happened. It's to tell yourself, maybe this time it will be different. And that sentence alone carries too much weight. So instead, you self-sabotage. Quietly, elegantly, you cancel the meeting, you forget the message, you procrastinate the application, and then you tell yourself it wasn't the right time, that you'll try again next week, that you're just not feeling it today. But underneath all that is fear. Because if you really tried with your full presence and it still didn't work, then what? Then the pain wins. Then the voice that said you were never enough gets louder, then the illusion breaks. And so you keep it intact. You don't fail because you never fully start. You preserve the idea that maybe if I really wanted to, I could. And that maybe becomes your shelter, your altar. Your sacred defense against having to face the truth that effort doesn't always guarantee liberation. Psychologists call it self-confirmation bias. You cling to a narrative that you're not ready, not capable, not meant for more, because it protects you from the collapse that might follow if you prove it wrong, and still feel the same emptiness. So you live in the middle, between effort and surrender. Between silence and screaming, between hiding and being seen. But no one stays in the middle forever. Eventually, you'll have to choose the safety of your sacred excuses or the danger of actual freedom, because self-sabotage isn't weakness. It's a ritual, a quiet, painful ritual meant to keep failure under control. But some part of you still wants to believe, not because it's safe, but because it's real. You stopped talking long before anyone noticed, not because you had nothing to say, but because no one really knew how to listen. Or maybe because the moment you tried, it felt like the world didn't have space for your truth. So silence became your shield. Not emptiness, defense, a second skin, safer than vulnerability, quieter than rejection. And slowly, it replaced your voice. You began to answer less, to share less, to smile more, the kind of smile that doesn't reach your chest. You mastered the art of nodding at the right time, of saying, "I'm good," when what you meant was, "I'm disappearing." But you weren't withdrawing from others. You were withdrawing from the part of you that didn't yet know how to express its ache, the raw, tangled part, the one that didn't make sense even to you. And with time, that silence felt like safety, but it also became a prison. Because what protects you can also isolate you. What numbs pain can also numb joy. What silences suffering, silences longing too. You stopped needing, you stopped asking. You stopped remembering what it feels like to be held without explanation. And yet, in the quietest moments, at night or in the middle of a crowd, something inside you still reaches out, not with words, just with a presence, a pressure, a weight in the chest that feels like a sentence trying to be born. But no one hears it, because even you forgot how to listen. This isn't about speaking more. It's about remembering the voice beneath the persona. The one you left behind when strength became your only identity. Ask, gently, what emotion would I have to face if I stopped being so busy being strong? That question doesn't require an answer, just honesty, because beneath the silence, there's a language waiting. Not to be heard, but to be felt. The night that shaped you wasn't meant to last forever. It came, it overwhelmed, it altered something deep inside, and then it just stayed. Not in form, but in feeling. It became part of your architecture, invisible but present, heavy but normal, and for years you've lived as if healing meant forgetting, as if real strength was the absence of memory, as if moving on required erasing the moment that unraveled you. But the truth is quieter and far more demanding. You don't move on by forgetting, you move by integrating, by letting the night in, not as a curse, but as a chapter, not as a threat, but as part of your shadow. Carl Jung taught that what we repress doesn't disappear. It waits, it follows, it guides our lives in silence until we're ready to face it, not to destroy it, but to reclaim the parts of us it buried. That night didn't ruin you. It made you forget who you were before it happened. And in that forgetting you became someone new, someone fragmented, someone functional, but also someone unfinished. You didn't die that night. You adapted. But now, you're allowed to return, not to suffer again, but to retrieve what was left there, the softness, the courage, the honesty, the real voice. Viktor Frankl wrote, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." But maybe that change doesn't mean becoming someone else. Maybe it means becoming what you were before the fear taught you to fracture. The night that trapped you also holds the key, but it won't reveal it while you're still running. Sit with it. Let it speak. Not with words, but with memory, with sensation, with the quiet grief of who you could have been and still might become. You are not alone. There is still time, but the next night must belong to you, not to the past.